All right, the question for today is about online BDSM relationships. The question today states that she has been in a dom-sub relationship in real life a few years ago. She seems to be getting back to wanting such a relationship again and notices how many people are engaged in online dom-sub relationships. So she asks, how does this work exactly? And to make this question a bit more general, I would like to know your opinion on the emergence of these online dom-sub relationships. To what extent do you think they have staying power? Do you think that an online BDSM dynamic must be temporary and that an in-life dynamic eventually needs to be planned out at some point?
I do think they're fundamentally temporary. I do think that they are not fully in touch with reality by nature. They are digital, they are virtual, and we have a deep, especially in our authentic endeavors, we have a deep need to be in contact with reality. So I don't think that an online dynamic can be truly fulfilling in the way that a kink dynamic needs to be long term. I do think that there's value for many people in these online dynamics because they can inhabit the frame of that role to explore what it might be like to be truly submissive. So they can put on the hat, put on the costume, and be the submissive or dominant version of themselves and feel out what that feels like without taking fully the risk of doing it with another person, showing that deep vulnerability that, hey, this is what I want, right? This is who I am. Let me really show you. It's anonymous. It's at a distance. It's just text if you're just talking about Reddit. And so there isn't the same level of risk, both emotionally, but there isn't truly also the same level of payoff. It's an opportunity to explore and to gain self-knowledge. So I think there's value there. I think you can understand, oh no, that actually is a limit for me. That's actually not going to be what I want it to be. Especially in some of the more psychological areas. So talking about humiliation, kink is, oh, I thought it'd be really hot if he called me a slut, but actually it triggers me and actually like it's not okay. So you can gain some self-knowledge in that regard. But there's a limit to it because it's different to be spanked by someone else than it is to spank yourself. And when you're not in control, when you have truly lost control of that event, it's a much heightened experience. And so you can't really know what it will be like. You can only approach. You can only extrapolate. And the same thing is true of like erotic stories. Part of what's being told there is you're taking a psychological journey into the frame of this other person. You're experiencing it with them or through them as they go through this story and these set of experiences. And in some ways, that's even more powerful because hopefully it's being written by someone who's actually done it and has a truthful recounting of what it is like, not a projected understanding of what it might be like. And then that can also be informative to the degree that you resonate with that story. So I think there's value in it at first, but I do think at some point you have to decide, is this really for me? Is this really what I want to pursue in a relationship? How important is it to me? Am I going to trade off other things in order to get this? If I'm dating a partner and he's dominant and he meets this need for me, but he's not as emotionally expressive as maybe I would prefer, is it important enough to make that trade-off? Or no, actually, I'll take the emotionally sensitive guy who's not dominant because I want that aspect met more. So yeah, I don't think they have permanence because they're just not quite fulfilling enough is my theory.
It could also be that a lot of people start engaging with online BDSM dynamics as a way to deepen a certain fantasy. So when you are reading erotica, BDSM erotica, or watching BDSM porn, you're obviously engaging in a fantasy. And that fantasy gets leveled up a notch when you feel like there's a real human behind the screen as opposed to just reading words that were written sometime in the past. The danger with that, and I think you've actually been a victim of this, is that someone will reach out, and this has happened to you. They've reached out to you online. They're interested in being a submissive. They're making all the right noises. They're doing all the things, and it goes on for a while, and it seems like you're really pushing their buttons just the way you want them to be pushed, and then they disappear. And then you rummage back through this experience and you're like, okay, this person was just using me to get off. You've used the word before, an online kink dispenser.
Sure.
You were a cheap version of a webcam whore.
Very cheap. It was free.
Basically just dispensing kink. So that is a danger for men, I think, who are engaging with women online, that, okay, they may not really be interested, or they may be exploring it and then find out that they're not interested. But since they haven't actually met you in person, perhaps they're not obligated to send you an email saying, hey, thanks for all the hot experiences and all the other things, but I've decided I'm not going to do it, or I've decided to do it locally, or I've decided I've just gotten out of my system, or whatever the thing is. Sure. The danger for women then, however, is there's a lot of predators online, and especially if they're submissive types, these people can say all the right things, because they don't actually have to be there, right? And so it's easy. Talk is cheap, right?
Sure.
And you can just write out all the right things that you're supposed to do, supposed to say as a dominant. You can even have an AI model come up with most of the stuff, honestly. And then you end up finding, if you end up meeting this person in real life, that they're not at all who they say they are. What really matters if they are supposed to be your dominant. So that's one of the dangers you are assuming when you dive into these things.
Yeah, it's an interesting notion. I have thought about this. There's an interesting aspect in which a man who is a competent dominant and is able to understand a woman's psyche, understand her emotional, erotic triggers, and to say and do the right things, even by text, is the female equivalent of an OnlyFans model. There is a shred of interactivity, which is the appeal of OnlyFans over porn. It seems like there's an interaction there that is based on your preferred sexual stimulus, right? Which for women is more emotional and more intellectual on average than men, or visual for men. But it is merely a shade. Now the problem becomes when you convince a normal girl to send you nudes, when you're just trying to jerk off to the fantasy of an OnlyFans model, and you've coerced a non-OnlyFans model into being your OnlyFans model for you. And so that is the challenge, right? Is that figuring out who's who's just trying to get off, and who's actually looking for a relationship is very, very difficult. There's no real way to do it. One of the challenges, I think, is, or one of the ways I have come to understand, is that if you meet someone who is relatively kink compatible, someone who, hey, this person is into the same kinks as I am, is looking for the same things, it's specific. It's not just, oh yeah, I'm into everything. Like, no, I'm into this, I'm not into this. There's a real discussion there. Then moving to an in-person meeting happens quickly and naturally, the same as it does on any other online dating app, where it's like, cool, well, let's get a drink and make sure that we're actually real people. Maybe you exchange photos, safe for work photos, not nudes, just so you know what the other person looks like if it's in a certain meeting space. And then you move to either we're meeting or we're not. And I have found that if a woman is not willing to switch to text, if a woman is not willing to meet in person after a certain period of time, it's not immediate, then it's a sign that this is actually just looking for erotic stimuli in the form of a story or an interactive story, not really looking for a relationship. And I'm sure that that's not true for some women. I'm sure that I'm misjudging some women. There's inevitably, when you draw a line, you're going to make wrong decisions, positive and negative, in both directions. But I think those are roughly the signs that I would say.